Thank you very much. Thank you. So we are in 9th of April 1950. It's Easter Sunday, and we're in Notre Dame in Paris. It's the Easter Mass. It's an atmosphere, as you can imagine, of reverence, an atmosphere of gravitas with the organ playing, the archbishop reciting hymns. And then suddenly an act of sacrilege is taking place. Some young men from the balcony of Notre Dame start shouting, "Dieu est mort! God is dead! God is dead!" And they start reciting a blasphemous poem. These young men were members of an avant-garde group called the Lettrists, which would later become the Situationists. And the horrifying attendees did not know it at that moment, but they witnessed history. Because they witnessed a great shift in the political landscape. They witnessed for the first time a left that didn't have as its focus politics, ideology, or a program to bring a revolution. They witnessed a left that has at its focus a gesture, a protest through an emotional outburst, a protest through provoking and through shocking the consciousness of the powers that be. And this left, in the following decades, became the familiar countercultural new left that today we all know. So half a century later, 60 years later, the new right, the fringe right, the right that is fighting the culture wars, having exhausted its ideas around politics, decided to copycat the new left. They also decided that the way to go would be to commit their own sacrilege. But this time, it would be a sacrilege against the holy cows of today. And the holy cows of today is not God, is not Notre Dame. The holy cows of today is what they understand as, quote, the woke ideology. Anti-racism, feminism, anti-Semitism. So the way they would commit this sacrilege is by playing with the boundaries of these sacred cows. Through memes, through shitposting, through trolling, they would try to constantly test these boundaries and shock the consciousness of today's power that be. But they needed a manifesto. Like the Situationists back in the day, they needed The Revolution of Everyday Life by Raoul Vaneigem, or The Society of the Spectacle by Guy Debord. The new right needed its own manifesto. And they found it in 2018, in this book. In the book, The Bronze Age Mindset, by a guy with the nom de guerre, Bronze Age Pervert. The book comes out in 2018, and Bronze Age Pervert was not someone who was important. He had a small following on Twitter, and yet, and although it's a self-published book, the book explodes. Within months, it's on the top 150 of Amazon. Not top 150 in its category, which would be good enough, top 150 from all Amazon books. Soon, it attracts more mainstream attention. So soon, it is reviewed by the conservative Claremont Review of Books. And soon, we find out that it has some appeal also among members of staff of the previous administration of the White House. And recently we hear that it also has a lot of appeal among political scientists, particularly among conservative political theorists. And the question is, who wrote this book? Recently, Politico did an expose on who is Bronze Age Pervert. And turns out, he's not a basement dweller. Turns out, he's a man of high intellect. Turns out he's an immigrant from Romania with a mind that got him to do a maths degree in MIT and a PhD in philosophy in Yale. So, what is the essence of the book? If we had to give the book in one sentence, what would that be? It would be a full front attack in anything that today we consider as the ideology of today. Michael Lanton, the conservative editor, described it as a flamethrower, a flamethrower bursting fire to the pieties of the left and of the right. So what is the worldview of Bronze Age Pervert? We will call him Bap from now on. How does he view the world and how does he view human beings? So for Bap, the key in understanding life on Earth, for animals and for humans, is that life is a struggle for space. Life, whether you're a healthy animal or whether you're a healthy human, in his eyes also a healthy animal, is you want space. You want space to do what? In order to control it, in order to conquer it, and in order to make it your fiefdom, in order to make it this fertile ground that you will use for great endeavors. But the problem is, for Bap, that we live in times where there is no such space. We live in times where all kinds of spaces are controlled and organized by people who are not great men. And this creates a life that is suffocating. For Bap, if you want to understand the suffocating life, look at the mega cities of the East. People living very close to each other. There's too much proximity. There is no privacy. There is no distance. But he says, don't make the mistake of thinking that the problem is modernity. Because he says, throughout most of history, human beings lived in this, he calls it yeast type of life. A life where the great, the few, are ruled by the many, the mediocre. So what is the archetype of human being that lives this unfulfilling life? He calls him the bagman. Bag, the thing that crawls, man, the bagman. It's a bit like Nietzsche's last man. So what is the characteristic of the bagman? The bagman has no aspirations of his own. The bagman has no sparkle in the eye. The bagman lives a life which is unfulfilling, and the bagman follows orders. And here's the worst part. The bagman does not follow orders from great men. Like if you follow orders from Napoleon, that's okay. But imagine following orders from women. Imagine following orders from the elders, from people who are physically weak. This, for Bab, is the biggest shame and the biggest embarrassment of our times. And again, not only of our times, but the state of life throughout history. So Bab looks the humanity throughout the ages, and he says, disgusting. But he says today, it's even worse, because today we have a perfect storm of three things. The one is the cultural dominance of socialism. Now, you understand, Bab is popular to the right. He hates socialism, not much more to elaborate here. A second thing that contributes to this perfect storm is democracy. So Bab is not a great friend of democracy. Why? Because democracy gives a say to the bagman. But also, the third element of this perfect storm, we've got democracy, we've got socialism, and also we've got feminism. Bab says that feminism is the key to understand the destruction of civilization that we are experiencing. He has a weird theory of feminism. He says that feminism is basically the rage of women against the beta men that dominate today. But he says that you give the vote to women, you give them this chance to influence the culture, and the result is what we see today. So his view of the world is, most of the past sucked, the present sucks, so what about the future? Well, the future will suck even more. Here is how Bab envisions our future. This is the product of his nightmares. Quote, should the tyranny that has descended on our age ever gain the power it seeks, and then be challenged enough to feel itself in danger, the mass annihilations that will be carried out by homosexual, transsexual, and especially lesbian commissars will exceed in scale and cruelty anything that has yet happened in known history. Imagine lesbian mulatta commissars with young Martin Sheen face and haircut manning the future Bergen-Belsens, installations that will span tens of miles. This is our future, says Bab. Our future is lesbian mulatta gulag guards. Is there any way out of this nightmare? Is there any way out of this, of what he calls the iron prison of our time? He says, yes, there is a way. There has been a way in the past, and that is the way of the Bronze Age. The Bronze Age is the period from 3000 before Christ to around 1000 before Christ. So even before classical Athens. We'll see why he's not a huge fan of classical Athens. So why the Bronze Age period? Because this is the period, he says, of the pirate. The pirate is a figure who is motivated by play, by having fun, by freedom, and by conquer. And for Bab, this is the good life. The good life is unleash your instincts and have them drive you wherever they may drive you. So this was the good days, he says. And as time goes by, we find fewer and fewer and fewer of such great men. So now the question is, okay, can we look back at these great men and at least get some inspiration? Like, can I learn something from the great conquistadores, from the great adventurers? And Bab looks at us and says, probably not. You're not up to the occasion because you have not understood, he says, about what type of men we're talking about here. So, in perhaps the most famous part of his book, he gives a view of what it means to be a really great man. Quote, imagine a Mitt Romney, by the way, you remember Mitt Romney, right? He was the candidate of the Republicans, the last candidate before Trump. Imagine a Mitt Romney, but different. A Romney who actually was capable of acting like he looks and was worthy of his looks. Imagine a younger Mitt Romney. A Romney who rouses the nation to a new war against India through power of charisma and speech alone. Then he leaves on ship to head the armies conquering India. But then come rumors that Mitt Romney ran a black mass Satanist dinner in New York. Also, people awaken one day and find that someone defaced the Holocaust Museum and the Lincoln Memorial. Rumors spread that it is Mitt and his friends in preparation to overthrow the government. So he is recalled from his command to stand trial. But instead of returning, Mitt runs to Russia, where he becomes a major advisor to Putin. Soon, though, he finally has to leave in great hurry when it is discovered he's been banging Putin's wives in secret. He runs to China, so blah, 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 he describes the story, and then he tells us, this is actually a real story. This is the story, exactly such and more was the life of the ancient Alcibiades from Athens. How inconceivable. That's the important thing, right? How inconceivable. You'll never be able to be like this man, he says. You're never going to be able. And then he asks the question, is there anyone today in the West who could be something like that? He says, Trump has some elements because he doesn't care. But he hasn't got the capacity to do these great things. So who are some other great men of our time? For Bab, Saddam Hussein is an example of a great man. Why? Because what was Saddam famous for? His extravagance. Like, there's this country over there, I'm going to attack it. I met your wife and I like her, I'm going to take her and I'm going to throw you to the dungeons. So the important thing for Bab is not that Saddam was a killer. Like, Stalin also killed a lot of people, but he didn't do it for the lols. So he's lower in Bab's appreciation. But with Saddam, it's this idea again that you unleash your instincts and you do like the world is your oyster. This is Bab's worldview. Emotionalism in steroids. Proud emotionalism. I feel like it, therefore I will do it. So, finding ourselves then in this uninspiring world, I mean, let's face it, we're not going to be Alcibiades. Most of us probably are not even going to be Saddam Hussein. What else can we do? How can we escape this great ugliness? And the answer is through beauty. Beauty, Bab says, is the secret. Because beauty gives us an insight. Beauty is like a ticket, like a bridge between this world and the world which is possible. And he says that beauty has something objective. You see it, and you understand immediately that here I'm in the presence of something different, of something great. This is why, if you go to Bab's Twitter page, you see it is full of half-naked male bodybuilders and men of very beautiful aesthetic presence. Again, why? Because it's an escape. By the way, notice the similar things with the new left, right? Like escape this time not through drugs or not through this other place. Escape through beauty. Escape through bodybuilding, maybe. That's why he advocates the way of sun and steel, which means physical perfection. Because then you see that a different life, away from the life of the bagman, is possible. So this is BAP. Now we need to ask, why is BAP popular? I mean, I find these ideas, we're going to evaluate them, but let's all agree that these are very weird ideas to begin with, right? And yet, these ideas are popular. This book, again, is a bestseller, although it's self-published and it had zero promotion. Why is it that young men find this book so popular? Well, think about it. You're a young man today, you look on the left, and what do you see? You see a left that is telling you that the mere fact that you exist means you have an original sin. The young man sees the left, and he sees a hatred for beauty, a hatred too often for achievement. And then you look on the right, and what do you see? Bores, empty suits, people who stand for nothing and fall for anything. And just see the Tory party in this country. And then you look at the fringes and you see these kind of red-pilled dorks who tell you how to pick up girls or will tell you stay away from women that will screw your life. Like nothing really inspiring there. And here comes Bab and says, I will give you an inspiration. All this ugliness that you see out there, I will fight it. So here's a sentence from the prologue of his book. I declare to you with great boldness that I am here to save you from a great ugliness. I am here to save you from a great ugliness. Who else is saying this? This is why Bab is influential. And you'll probably already have noticed that this is why other very controversial, to put it mildly, male figures are also influential. Think of Andrew Tate, for example. Someone who proudly says, I'm strong, I have success with my romantic endeavors, and I make money. So this is Bab, this is why he's popular. And now let's evaluate him. There are two levels in this evaluation. The first level is, you've probably already heard it if you know anything about Bab, that he's racist, he's sexist, he's an anti-Semite. No disagreement here. He is. Bab is not going to win any diversity award anytime soon. But I think there's a bigger problem with Bab. I think there's a problem which goes beyond this obvious criticism that he is these things. What do most critics say about Bab? He is very radical, he's very extremist. I think the problem is the opposite. In the things that really matter, in his fundamental principles, Bab is very, very mainstream. In the way he views the world, in the way he views human beings, Bab is as mainstream as it gets. Here's why. Like everyone else, Bab hates reason. He says reason is a scam. As he says in the book, quote, "No, nothing great was ever achieved by reason." Nothing great was ever achieved by reason. Now, today, if I walk to an Ivy League philosophy department and I say, nothing ever was ever achieved by reason, I will get an applaud. Because half of the people there, we believe reason is useless because we don't have free will, they're determinists. And the other half will believe that reason is this Western kind of construction, in which case it is useless. Like everyone else, present company excluded, BAP does not believe in human agency. Remember, for BAP, you're all, almost all of you, destined to be bagmen. How do the few manage to not be bagmen? We don't know. They have this revelation, there's almost like a miracle that happens, and you are not a bagman anymore. But for most of you, your fate is sealed. Like almost everyone else, BAP tells us you can't be sure about anything. In the book, at some point, he goes through a rant where he says, the history you think you know, it's probably not the true history. He says, at some point, we added 200 years in history that was not there. And he says that even the geography that you know is perhaps a scam. He says, I have this theory that Bangkok City might be the same city like Mexico City, but pilots are hiding something from us and they are not telling us that. You cannot be sure about anything. Have you heard that anywhere else? Because I have. The postmodernists are telling us the same thing. Remember that famous article by Baudrillard, are you sure that the Gulf War actually happened? I mean, he was metaphorical, but the essence is the same. You cannot be sure about anything. Another way that BAP is very, very conventional is that BAP is not a great friend of humanity. Again, for BAP, human beings are disgusting. He puts it exactly in these words. I've heard this so many times from the environmentalists. How many times have we heard human beings are a plague on planet Earth? So BAP looks at Extinction Rebellion and gives them the thumbs up. Or Extinction Rebellion looks at BAP and gives him the thumbs up. And the last way that BAP is very, very conventional. Like everyone else, BAP looks at the past. The left is looking at the past, at that time before, quote, neoliberalism, whatever that was, maybe the 60s, the 50s. Conservatives definitely look at the past, at that time of the nuclear family, where the guy with the suit and the hat was coming home and the wife with the 2 kids is rushing with her pretty dress to welcome him. Traditionalists are looking at the past. Have you seen all these Twitter accounts? How more beautiful it was back in the day with the cathedrals. Today we have skyscrapers, they suck. National conservatives look at the past. They prefer the United States before the revolution. Everyone looks at the past. BAP just takes it a step further. He says, all of you suckers look 1 or 2 centuries before. I will go 3,000 years before. This is why I claim that BAP, at the end of the day, is not too radical, is not too extremist, is actually very, very conventional where it matters, which is how we view the world. So, to end, I will say one thing positive, that the challenge to do away with the ugliness that is around us is a very good endeavor. What the inspiration that BAP gives, go and do heroic endeavors, it's nice, it's inspiring. But the question is, I will go out and do heroic endeavors for what? Like, what for? What would be the goal? And BAP says that the goal should be power, conquest, and that you will be adored and remembered. And I see this vision and I say, what a waste of a life. I will do things so that other people will adore me. Like, isn't this a bit like the bagman? The bagman doesn't have his own values. He looks at other people and say, I will do whatever other people is doing. And BAP is telling you that you should also be determined by other people, because you should either rule them or you should try to make sure that they adore you. Ayn Rand has a great insight. He says that the conqueror is in the same way a second-hander as his victims, that he has to live from them. So in a way, he's also dependent on others. He's not really an independent thinker. And to be honest with you, when I think about that vision of Bab, like this great man who goes rogue and creates his own fiefdom of conquest, what comes to mind for me was the film Apocalypse Now. Colonel Kurtz, Marlon Brando in the film, isn't this what he's doing? He's had enough of the ugliness of this world. He says, to hell with morality. Careful, not with the current morality. He's not saying I have a better morality. He says, to hell with morality in general. And he embarks in this campaign of conquest. He goes deep in the jungle, literally inside in free space. And he enslaves these people who actually adore him as a god. So he ticks every box of Bab. And what is the result? The result is terror. The result is disease. The result is stasis. And the result is death. Because this is where a life, where you say to hell with reason, will lead you. But for us, for us who do not agree that human beings are disgusting, for us who don't think that our future is mulata commissars in the gulags, I think what we should do is we should pick exactly these tools that Bab has thrown away. We should pick reason, the idea that we are capable of navigating this world, and we should also pick the other idea that he has thrown away, which is the idea of human agency. And once we've picked them, we can see that the best days are not 3,000 years ago, but the best days lie ahead of us. Thank you. Thanks.